Okay, and we're live. How are you, people? Welcome to the Sports Therapy Association podcast. My name is Matt Phillips of Creative Run Chat Live. But tonight, Tuesday, as always, 8 o'clock on Facebook or YouTube, it's all about the Sports Therapy Association podcast, putting some evidence back into soft tissue therapy. So welcome. If you are listening to the podcast, that's fine. That's great. Thank you very much for your support. This is recorded live. If you want to join us live and be able to ask guests live, then you can do that. It's on a Tuesday night, like I say, at 8 o'clock. And you can join via the Facebook page, Sports Therapy Association, or you can join via YouTube live stream as well. And that way you can intermingle with other soft tissue therapists. It's a great way of networking. And of course, you can ask our guests questions live. But if you do prefer in your own time to chill out and listen to the audio, then that's great. But please do, if you can, leave a rating and a review. As long as it's kind of a 5 and amazing, includes that word, that'd be great. Because it just helps the podcast appear more in Google search results. That's the only reason. It's what changes a podcast from maybe 2,000 downloads a month, which is what we kind of get now, which is great, to 3, 4, 5, 6,000 and then a million. We really need those ratings to help us. So much appreciated. Obviously, if you wanted to watch the recording, you can go to YouTube. It will be on there. You can also go to the Sports Therapy Association website at thesta.co.uk. All of the show notes and the access to the YouTube video is put on there as well. You can have a little look around the STA webpage. And there you go. So before we bring up, tonight is a new month. Okay, very excited, starting a new focus. It's working very well, this focus thing, because it's giving some shelf life to very important topics. So last month was all about CrossFit. We finished off with a fantastic part 4 with Michaela Breeze, MBE, probably one of the most famous weightlifters from Great Britain, double Olympian, 6 medal winning Commonwealth champion, an absolute huge powerhouse, no pun intended, of resource for anybody who is interested in weightlifting, Olympic lifting. It was really interesting as well because Michaela obviously comes from that background, very big in giving seminars in CrossFit gyms and trying to kind of mix the two together. It was great how Michaela said that thanks to CrossFit, weightlifting and Olympic weightlifting has continued, because otherwise it would have just died from stagnancy. But there were some interesting warnings that Michaela was putting out there from what she sees goes on in some CrossFit gyms. She was very quick to say it's not all of them. So if you do have any CrossFit clients, then good idea to check out the episode with Michaela, especially if they're coming in a little bit injured. And also watch out if for workshop dates with Michaela. There are some seminars being planned for soft tissue therapists, specific for you guys. If you're an STA member, that will come out on newsletters. So make sure you are checking your spam folder. With that in mind, the latest STA newsletter has come out. Check your spam folders if you haven't received it. It appeared today. And in there is, I've been told, well, I have seen it actually because I opened it up. It's there's an important survey which needs filling out. Say no more than that. Just have a look in there. And also there's details on what we're going to talk about tonight with half of who we intended. Deborah Thurlow-Rowley hasn't made it so far, but we're keeping our eyes open. But we do have Dr. Fiona Higgs, and both of these STA members, and you'll be familiar with them because of fantastic workshops and seminars put on by Dr. Fiona Higgs. And also you may have seen Deborah Rowley in at Therapy Expo this year, last year, November. We did a fantastic, well-received presentation on endometriosis. So we're going to have half of that partnership up very shortly. Dr. Fiona Higgs will be with us. Just checking I've got all of my back office work out of the way. I think we have. So without further ado then, I shall bring up Dr. Fiona Higgs and we'll be listening about a very exciting project coming up, all to do with women's health. So a great way to start off this February focus on women's health. Hey, Dr. Fiona Higgs, how are you?
Evening, Matt. I'm not too bad, thank you. Don't get called doctor very often.
Well, I'm very much in favour of recognising years of study and reward. It's important. So yeah, thanks for joining us. We've had a little bit of hassle technology-wise trying to get Deborah along. Yeah. Hopefully Deborah will be coming, but the onus is on you now. No pressure.
Gosh, yeah, no pressure indeed.
So yeah, very exciting to open up this month focus on women's health with yourself and Deborah. Before we do that, obviously a lot of people in the room, and people are coming in now. Let's just say hello to people before we start so they feel that we're paying attention. Brian Huxley is here. How are you doing, Brian? Thanks for joining us. If you listen to the podcast, and what's happening now is I'm bringing up the logos of people and what they're saying up on the screen. So it's a lovely way of networking, putting your own logo out there, getting to know people who maybe are in your area, chatting behind the scenes. You can have your own little chat whilst I'm talking to Fiona if you want to, that's fine. It's a great way of networking, and that's the feedback we've had from these Tuesday evenings. Hi, Glenn Murphy. Hi, Alistair Cunningham. Louise Aker is here as well. Evening all. Sorry I'm late. Don't worry, Aker. Don't worry, Aker. Don't worry, Louise. So are we. It's fine. Obviously, people joining us live, whether it's by Facebook or via YouTube, feel free to put some questions in, and we will pay attention to that little comment box to our left and answer anything you come up with. So, yes, for people who aren't aware of who you are, Dr. Fiona Higgs, maybe give us a little brief summary of particularly how you've arrived to this point in your career where you've put together this project. Yeah, tell us about it.
Oh, where to start? Well, in a nutshell, I'm a sports massage and exercise therapist, but my background is in sport and exercise science and mainly research and teaching. And I currently, I guess that like a lot of people, have a mainly virtual consultation kind of clinic, but I also deliver workshops and courses online covering mostly biomechanics, sort of from an introductory level. And I ended up kind of on this subject area, really, I guess. If there are a lot of people maybe listening who have followed the STA podcast, might have seen me on here talking about some women's health kind of related issues, just because I kind of chimed in on a string. I think, Matt, you posted something about NSAIDs being banned from a particular event in the States, an ultramarathon event. And being a woman who relies on NSAIDs for certain types of pain once a month, I thought I'd chime in with a sort of perhaps a different insight, just that is something that could be detrimental or maybe a little disheartening to female participants in that event if that they were relying on it to get through it. So yeah, that was how I kind of started the conversations, I suppose, on that with you, Matt. And then Gary, I'd never met Debs, but we are going to be working together, and I suppose we're going to talk about that a bit more. But we met through Gary, so I don't know how far to kind of go into that topic or what your question's going to be. But
how did you feel about Gary when you first met him? No, we won't go down that road. Gary's actually in the house here. Gary, if people are listening and don't realise, Gary Benson is the founder of the Sports Therapy Association, and is actually in the house tonight. So hi, Gary, thanks for joining us. Yeah, that was amazing. That was really good. I love following you on social media and have done for a while, because one, it was just a great interjection. It was really polite and it was brave in a sense, because most of the other thread was going, about time too. We know that NSAIDs are terrible for endurance athletes and it causes all sorts of terrible problems and even death. And you had the kind of, I can't say balls now, can I really? You had the ovaries to go in there, given that it's Women's Health Month. You had the ovaries to go in there and actually say, hold on a sec. What about people who, female athletes who depend on these NSAIDs to actually be able to compete? We're saying you can, and it was brilliant because I watched one by one everyone else in the thread who had been kind of saying all this very mainstream, NSAIDs are bad, NSAIDs are bad, going, oh, yeah, you got a point there. It was brilliant. It was great. And we did a show about it. And yeah, and so it highlighted as well, incredibly, this lack of consideration in such a massive, well-known mainstream event, forgetting about the women, which was like in this day and age, is surprise. So it was really good. Yeah, well, look, the good news is for people who are listening, I can see Fiona here. If you listen to the podcast, Fiona's face is just lit up because I can see Deborah Thurlow-Rowley has appeared down below. So I'm going to bring Debs up. hopefully. Hey, Debs.
Hi.
And you're there as well. And you got sound. How are you?
Well, I've had to go to my mobile phone because clearly the tablet is just not having it.
Okay, fine. You're quite loud, so all I'm going to say is move the phone a little bit further away from you. That's all. Is it quite loud for you, Fiona?
Yeah, if you've got any headphones, maybe it might help as well.
Yeah. I just want it. Now you've managed to join us. I want it to sound perfectly.
Okay.
So you might want to phone the phone a little bit further away, even still.
Okay.
Now try even further away. Don't worry, we still see all of you in your full glory. I just don't want it to be deafening.
How's that? I'm actually turning the volume down.
I would move away from it because I can still just see your head.
Okay.
I say just sit back, move back a bit. Now talk back there.
How's that?
That's much better. Just stay away from the camera. That's fine. We can see everything now. We can see the whole clinic and the lovely, looks like you're in a Swiss log cabin somewhere with anatomy photos. Anyway, so great. I'm really glad you managed to make it with us. What have you missed so far? So Fiona's been fantastic in your absence. She started off with a description of, actually, it was going back, I think you saw it as well. It was the Twitter thread. I think it was on Twitter, where I was just saying Fiona kind of stepped into a thread which was going about time too that NSAIDs are being banned in a very well known ultra endurance event, and there's a lot of people in a nice way, you know. Had it been 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it would have been cool to see everyone jumping on saying NSAIDs are bad, why all these athletes? But Fiona came along and said, hold on, what about women who depend on NSAIDs? Are you saying that they can no longer compete? And it was like, and I was just saying, we watched all the other people in the thread kind of going, oh, the woman's got a point, you know. And it was I think it highlighted quite nicely, it's a nice anecdote of where we are today, that we still live in an age where unfortunately women's health isn't considered, maybe. And maybe even, we were talking about this, weren't we? I find it hard to believe that on the organizers of this ultra endurance event there is no women involved. I mean, especially in ultra endurance, there's some fantastic female athletes out there, and yet I find it hard to believe that no one said, well, hold on guys, you can't just blanket statement, let's ban NSAIDs. What about, you know, because how have NSAIDs fit into your life? Debs, can you imagine being told by someone you're not allowed to take these anymore if you want to compete in a sport?
Sadly, I'm allergic to them. So I'm not taking anything. It's to do with my painkillers.
Such a shame. That sound's not going to work, is it? Fiona, can you hear it?
Unfortunately, it is quite difficult to make out what you're saying.
Yeah.
If you've got a headphone,
I would suggest checking for some headphones, Debs, if you have, wherever you are in the world. Northampton, aren't you? Let me just check on Yellow Pages and see if I can get some headphones sent to you. No, it's really loud and blurry, I'm afraid, for the podcast. Maybe, I don't know what to suggest now.
First time this has happened, I think. Had somebody with maybe the microphone's covered up if there's a case on
something
it
on the phone. I don't think anything is going to suddenly change. Try saying something again, Debs, if you can. If you listen to the podcast, we're just sorting out a little bit of a technical problem here. Normally you have a meet up before. Still really loud and distorted.
Still really loud.
Oh, it's better.
Well, it was better then. Something happened which made it clearer. Don't know what you did then, but it kind of started. I'll edit this for the podcast version. Don't worry, this won't go out to our 2,000-3,000 people. If you're joining us live, how are you? Let's talk about you for a while. How's things? Make sure you tune in.
If that's working or not, I'm
there.
sorry.
Whatever you did now, it went clear. It sounded like you got out of the pond, the swamp, and it was all clear.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's beautiful.
Yay.
Try speaking again.
I can't hear you very well, though.
Oh, we can hear you okay, I think. Let's continue with that. Can you hear us okay?
I can just about hear what you're saying. You may have to repeat. Sorry.
You're really loud. That's okay. We might repeat. Just sit back a little bit, because otherwise it's going to be impossible to have an audio track. Okay, so yeah, Debs, you were going to say, can you imagine somebody telling you no more NSAIDs if you want to be in this competition? How would that affect you? Could you live without NSAIDs?
So I'm allergic to NSAIDs.
All right.
So I can't have them anyway. So I would suggest taking turmeric, black pepper and ginger as an anti-inflammatory. But how does that stand in a race? No idea. but I would still take painkillers, and if I needed painkillers, what was I allowed to take? Especially if I was running and I was on my period, how would I do that?
Exactly. And yeah, so that's the problem. Women do, it seems, many athletes will depend on these NSAIDs. And there might be alternatives, but again, just a blanket statement ruling out probably half, or if not more, of the population who are going for the race. I just want to check, people listening to us live, how is it sounding your end? Because for me, Deb's is still really loud. So Becky or Sarah who have joined us, just let us know how it's sounding when Deb speaks. So yeah, we were talking about this new project anyway. So yeah, that thread raised awareness that women in sport is still a topic full of misconceptions and misinformation and no information. So Fiona, is that kind of part of the reason why this project has emerged?
I think actually when you were saying misconceptions, you kind of slowed down with myths, and I thought you were going to say mystery. I do think there's a lot of mysteriousness in terms of like a lot of women or people with female reproductive organs do not necessarily share their experience, and so it's just quite a personal thing, and for that reason there's not always a lot of openness and discussion around the things that might be affecting them. And it may not be that there's even a lack of interest, it might be just that there's just not conversation going on. And I do think that in the recent months and throughout maybe towards this side of COVID, we've had a lot more conversation, certainly on social media with the STA. It's interesting to know like whether or not this issue is kind of being more openly discussed in other kind of fields related to ours. But yeah, like I do think there's a bit more openness, and but it is somewhat of a mystery. And also you don't learn a lot when you're younger and in school and like going through adolescence. And those are the years when you kind of need to really start learning about your, you know, how your body's working. So yeah, by the time you get to adulthood, it's not particularly affected. I think, has Deb's camera been turned around to face the other way?
I'm not sure either that or she's turned into what can only look as kind of a grayscale cauliflower of some form. I'm not quite sure. That's all I'm seeing filling up the camera at the moment. Debs, in case you can hear us, yeah, you've changed into something grey and dark.
Yeah.
Definitely not human. I'm not sure what happened there. I hope you're okay. It's like some kind of invasion. But anyway, yeah, I mean, we've talked to already. We had Emma Brockwell on the show, Grania Donnelly. We also talked to male physios as well. And it still, if you're in the profession, seeing people, it still seems to be, like you said, mystery, taboo, not talked about. Still bad information coming from GPs has been a theme that's come across as well. Yeah, so no, it's great. And how's this really, what if you can't see the live show and the cameras? I'm just wondering what has happened to Debs now. It's, I don't know, we'll wait till we hear from her. But yeah, how's the project going to work? It's called, is it definitely going to be called the WIST podcast now?
I believe that.
Is that going to catch on, is it?
Yeah.
WIST. I like it. WIST, Women in Sports Therapy.
Yeah.
WIST, it's nice. We need more acronyms. The WIST podcast. Yeah, so how's it going to work? What's the format going to be then? What have you got set up?
So we do have a schedule of 5 episodes per series lined up. And the idea was that we wanted it to be primarily discussions on health issues that are affecting both therapists and patients or clients of therapists. And we do also want to have some interesting subject discussion around making decisions in life or around business or work-life balance. As well as maybe 1 or 2 interviews with people who might be of interest to the listeners. So it's going to be a bit of a mixture of content, really. And it will be pre-recorded. So we're not planning to do a live broadcast like this podcast. We'll be doing a kind of like a recording, releasing a recorded podcast once a month. towards the end of the month. It wasn't really like meant to be a pun, that, but it kind of sounds like it once a month.
I've only just got it. My bloke, sorry.
Yeah,
I've got it now.
Well, you got it. So yeah. So towards the end of the month, we've got some dates in. So the 28th of February should be the first podcast going out episode, and it will be. I'm actually probably going to be calling upon Scott and Matt to maybe help with some of the technical stuff. But with any luck, it will all be arranged and on all the main podcasting platforms that the current podcast is on too. So yeah, that's the
superb.
plan.
I'm going to ask you a little bit of a teaser of what kind of the episodes are going to cover, and I know you've got some guests lined up. Before we do that, let's go back to Debs. Debs, how did you get involved? Can you hear me okay, Debs? Just checking. You can't hear me. You can't hear me. Okay. I'll come back to Debs when she says she can hear me. It's just so yeah. Fiona, then, well, let's start with a little bit of a teaser about what you've got coming up. You mentioned that, what's the opening episode going to be on February the 28th? What are you going to be talking about?
So we've got quite probably one of the most under-discussed, I guess, topics, which is periods that are maybe excessive in blood loss. And the problems that can lead to in terms of deficiencies and anemia. So a lot of people may not know that there is more than one type of anemia, not just iron, but also folate and B vitamins as well. So and we're hoping that because both Debs and I have had experience of this, that we can kind of bring our knowledge and what we've learned to the discussion. And there is actually, I suppose, quite a lot of just things that you might miss through a standard kind of assessment of a client, and also just like subject matter that maybe not that easy to broach a subject with a client. But if you notice some of these symptoms, they might actually help you to help them. And if there are also therapists listening who've had experience of that, it could be a nice way to kind of, get some ideas of how to deal with it and ask for help, particularly from GPs. I think a lot of people, when we're trying to either deal with a problem personally or for a client, it can be difficult to know how to actually ask the right questions and push the right buttons and get the referrals that we need to either services or, amenities or whatever you might need.
I think it was interesting when we were talking off air about your plans, that obviously the audience is going to be primarily soft tissue therapists. Am I right with that?
Yeah.
But it's not just for, I think I probably assumed at the beginning, it's going to be advice for soft tissue therapists on how to look after clients that come in with maybe symptoms, asking the right questions, sending out to the right healthcare professional if you notice something needs kind of assessing by somebody else. But also it's interesting to hear, it'll also be an opportunity for sports therapists, female sports therapists, to actually know more about themselves and how to deal with something they may be experiencing. Debs, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, but I'm deaf.
Oh, you sound beautiful. You sound great now.
Okay.
God, if only we all sounded like you. Yeah, so do you get the impression that there may be female sports therapists out there who could do with some self-education on maybe their own bodies and maybe symptoms they're getting, and rather than persevering and trying to continue their kind of profession, they could do with some educating themselves?
I think it's about sharing the information as well, trying to all sing off the same hymn sheet. I know that sounds quite sort of cliche, but I think it's more about making it okay to not be okay and share that, making sure that symptoms that we may be feeling across the board on a health basis are normal, okay. It's okay to speak about it. Let's talk about some of them. And then some of the subjects that we'll be mentioning, I don't know whether Fiona's kind of said already, are non-health based as well. So again, sharing knowledge, sharing information, I think is where it's key. So from a sports perspective, when it comes to pains or say menopause or any of the other topics that we're going to be picking up, endometriosis, lone working, etc. My belief is that the more we make it normal, the less it is, you know.
That's a really good point. And that reminded me actually of the idea about sharing, talking. That's something we touched on when we had the episode on feeling safe. We had people, sports therapists, coming up, sharing their experiences, ranging from just inappropriate comments all the way to stalking and getting the police involved. And one of the themes that came up was nobody felt they could talk about it, or you know, they didn't want to mention it. So as far as women's health goes, I mean, that's kind of part of women's health anyway, isn't it? So I like it, all about communication. So and let me just get this clear for people who just joined us or maybe listening to the podcast here. If people want to come and listen, that's going to be possible, is it? You can come and listen live, or is it going to be released just as a recording?
No, I think at the moment we're so it is actually interesting. So as a discussion point in itself, trying to balance work and life and, you know, meet your commitments, but without really over committing, is that the right word? Like, or yeah, we talked about this quite a bit actually, just, you know, through discussing what we wanted to cover on the podcast, and realized where we were going to need to draw our boundaries in terms of like scheduling and trying to meet the needs for the STA and the members. We feel at the moment that the best offering that we can give is a recording that's well planned and has meaningful content, and then answer questions that come in a kind of organized fashion, and have time to prepare answers and kind of give more thought at the end of the series. So our final episode, I think Debs and I have agreed that we'll record it later. So we'll be releasing a monthly episode from February, March, April, May, and then and June, I think. And then, yeah, maybe it's I think I might have put in, I think our Q&A, maybe the 6th episode or the 5th episode, but I'm pretty sure we agreed on 5 episodes. I might have planned one than we
yeah, 5, definitely.
And just to reiterate, STA members, I mean, one of the massive advantages among the many of being an STA member is all this information is on the STA newsletter that's just gone out. So make sure you do check your spam folders in case you haven't received that. Gary works painstakingly and the rest of the team to send these emails out. So if you haven't received anything today and you're an STA member, then do check your junk mail or spam, because all you got to do is say accept this. Then in theory, although we know that, you know, we sometimes get IT technical problems, don't we? But in theory, once you say the STA address is safe, then your computer should bring it to your inbox. Great. So, I mean, that's really interesting in itself. I think that's classic, because I think in one of the episodes, you're going to be talking about work-life balance. And here we have a real-life example of 2 female therapists who are trying to put together a project to help other female therapists, but work-life balance is getting in the way, and has meant you've got to do it this way. I think that's really interesting. Okay, well, it sounds like a fantastic project. And what else have we got coming up? We've mentioned the first one is periods, excessive blood loss. Actually, before we do that, let me just not forget there's other people in the room. We've got a question here. Actually, Gary's asked a question here. Well, let's go. Becky, first of all, has said, great point. I have personal experience with B12 deficiency. This personal experience has enabled me to pick up on B12 deficiencies walking into my clinic. Okay, so that's something. Thanks for sharing, Becky.
Brilliant, Becky.
Yeah. And then with regards to menstrual cycle, Gary says 64% of our members are female. How does period health affect their clinical practice or working as part of a sports team? I'm sure it's not as easy as cancelling clients or planning diaries in advance. Deb's just shaking her head there.
Period app. That helps to know when it's coming. Or if you're non-bleeder, so if you're hormone replacer, we'll go through this on the podcast a bit more, but it depends on what the woman is controlling her periods with. If they're controlled, it's got a bit more of a diary. If not controlled, then a period app is quite good to try and work around that sort of situation. Knowing your trigger foods, knowing what stresses you out, because stress can bring on a bleed depending on your age. So there's loads of different factors, but if you're aware of those factors, you can then kind of manage things a bit better.
That's very interesting. So rather than, I mean, it might get to the stage where for some people you do have to plan your work and commitments around it, but there's also other things you could do to try and avoid that by working out things like triggers and diets and all the things you've mentioned.
Yeah, I'd chime in actually and just add that I think if you look at I know it's a new subject area, and it certainly doesn't necessarily it certainly doesn't, like, a menstrual cycle does not fall by any means under the social model of disability. But when you look at how, I don't know how familiar our listeners or you, Matt, or Debs, like, are with this concept, but like our social model of disability views like the barriers that people experience who have a disability as being created by society, purely based on the fact that most people wouldn't consider them barriers. So, like, I mean, a good example that might like be similar to in theory to it is if you're a short person and you're trying to buy trousers, they might be too long for you because most people are an average height, or the majority of people will be able to buy an average length trouser. Or if you're tall, for example, you might struggle to find them long enough. And our world is designed for the average person. Unfortunately, you know, because there's almost an equal split in our society, it's really, I think, down to the way that we've developed as, like, men have typically worked more and been responsible for design elements of our environment and like the work environment too. And we don't have considerations. Our whole social construct, or the idea of our workplaces, is not to really work around the needs of women or people with a menstrual cycle, if you think of it that way, and hormonal fluctuations in themselves. Like, for example, for me, I'm not as affected hormonally, like in terms of mood, by day one of my period. But like halfway through ovulation, it can be really, really a tough time for me. And, you know, not many people will even be aware of that, like themselves, about their own pattern. And it does take, like Deb suggested, you know, tracking your cycle and your symptoms. You'd be amazed how the pattern is so obvious, and you may never have realised. I only realised as I sort of got into my early 30s. I'm now 35. Like, you know, I've spent all of my adult life feeling like I'm on an emotional roller coaster, feeling like I'm the only one, when there was a risk to it all along. I wasn't aware of it, didn't even know. Say, write down when you get your period, and that's it. You know, and even that word in itself has probably got, you know, the minute you say period, it's you know, divides the room.
Menses, that works. Menses.
Yeah, very clinical though. Yeah.
Good points, Fiona. Yeah, very good.
I could just I can't. It's going to be so good listening to you too, and the things you're talking about, and it is so interesting about things which I think a lot of people won't be aware of, both men and women. Which brings me on to my next question. Are you expecting your audience for these 5 or 6 episodes to be primarily women, or do you think there'll be something of value for men to tune in and listen to?
Do you want to answer, Fiona, or do you want me to answer?
You can go for it, Debs.
Go for it, Debs.
Ideally, I would love men to be part of it as well, because it's going to affect their daily life. As Gary mentioned.
Sorry, Deb. Sorry, I just want to sit back a little bit because I'm scared that it's just going to be too loud. That's it. Yeah.
All right.
Put your feet up and kind of sit back.
Keep my voice down as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we can hear you really loud here. That's all.
Okay. So I would love men to be part of it, because I think that it affects men, and there's a lot of male therapists out there that have females coming into their clinics as well. So it's really important that they can then give the advice, for example, on painful periods and how they manage them. You know, have you tried a period app? Are you monitoring what's happening? I see a lot of women come through the clinics that I work in, my own, that are dealing with perimenopause and menopausal symptoms that people don't expect, you know, stiff neck, frozen shoulder, and actually they're linked to some menopause symptoms. And it's not till they're in acute and chronic pain, sometimes chronically acute pain, that we end up going, And I ask the question because I'm so blunt anyway. I'm like, can you just tell me about your periods? What's going on that side of things? And women will directly say that. I think from a male's perspective, and the podcast I think will cover this, but how does a male therapist then ask a woman, oh, can you just tell me about your periods as well? I think as a woman to woman, it's much easier to open a conversation. But I would like to share on possibly how a male might ask that question as a male therapist. How would you, it's not a comfortable conversation, so how would you put that out? And I've got a few ideas to put through.
Great. So it sounds sounds a great value to guys as well. And hopefully if you are listening to the podcast, then that makes perfect sense. You know, tune in, because I imagine probably at least, if not more, half of your population who come and see you are going to be female. And and as we saw, I mean, we've had a few episodes now where we talked about disorders and diseases that go diagnosed. When we had the episode on endometriosis with yourself, Debs, you kind of highlighted the fact that it can go undiagnosed for how many years? Was it like 10 years or something? The stats kind of showed.
Yeah, on average, it's come down to a diagnosis can take now 7.5 years, but originally, it was like 10 years. I mean, I was in my 30s before I knew, and I'd had it since I was 13. So it can take a long time.
And this is because it's the right questions haven't been asked, maybe because of embarrassment, or what do you think the biggest factor is? Is it lack of knowledge?
That and communication, sharing knowledge, like we're going to be doing on the podcast, sharing and opening up the can of worms, if you like, opening the transparency. It's important to share, like you were saying about, male therapists coming and having a look at the podcast as well. The more information you have, the better, the more knowledge you can put forward, the better the therapy that you're going to give. So I think it's important, not just on female health matters, because we'll be covering other topics as well, but it's a good way of seeing it from the female perspective and how it may affect other females within your environment, and having a more rounded approach to life as a male or female. The more knowledge you have, the better you can help others, I think.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and to add to that as well, like just, from a perspective, you asked about male listeners and female listeners, and like really it's just anyone at all, it doesn't matter how you identify, what your situation is, like if you
good point,
any kind of like questions or issues on subjects that relate to this type of topic, you're welcome. And I think that from a perspective of just like feeling comfortable talking about subjects too, like I think that even in our personal lives, like when we're interacting with, say, people in our family or household, that's a good place to start practicing talking about it, because sometimes it's really hard to like open these subjects up with clients. But like just having some people to listen to who are talking about it is a good place to start and understand. And you don't always have to actually talk about it as well. Sometimes it's just considering, is this person experiencing something like they don't have any control over themselves? Because I know I've spoken with women who are going through perimenopause and menopause, and it's like their bodies are out of control. You literally can't, there's nothing you could do almost for certain times. So understanding that and giving some consideration to that, and
like Fiona's saying, everyone is welcome regardless of how you identify. Absolutely right, Fiona. And from a perspective of female health, so for example, endometriosis, it's found in mostly women, but obviously any women that have had a gender change, obviously that can then affect their lives to do with hormonal change because of tablets that they've had to go on for that to happen, or however you identify. There can be other obstacles that we face when we come to then having a massage, that can be awkward, and let's talk about it. It's absolutely fine, no problem whatsoever. We're therapists, so let's open it.
great. There's a question here from Becky which I want to bring up, but before we do that, it's great that people are starting to ask questions. You kind of put, I saw in the newsletter that you put, if people are interested in hearing about certain topics in discussions, and they can email you. What was the contact email again? Did we go for a WIST one? Did we? It was WIST, wasn't it?
WIST
I like it.
at thesta.co.uk, I believe.
It's beautiful. That's the one. We'll make sure that go into the show notes. So you're happy for people to email you at WIST, which is women in sports therapy. So WIST at thesta.co.uk. Don't forget about the in front of STA. Yeah, you're happy for people to kind of email you and say, oh, can you talk about this and do this? That's okay.
Yeah, I think we haven't had a chance to sort of fully get into the inbox, so please bear with us if it takes a day or two. Maybe by the weekend we'll have succeeded with that, but yeah, like, please do get in touch, especially if there's subjects or topics that you'd like to hear of, or questions you'd like us to answer on the podcast specifically. Yeah, I think it would be great to hear from people who have an interest.
Superb. And there's the address up on the screen there.
Gary.
Produced by Gary, founder of the STA. Brilliant. Yes, the WIST at thesta.co.uk. So with that in mind, then Becky's put something here which you don't have to go into too much detail, but it's an example of a question that's come up. I'll read it out for people who are listening to the podcast or watching it. I'd be interested, says Becky Carroll, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on contraceptive pills and their effects on female athletes and women as a whole. Obviously a big topic. What kind of enters your mind, first of all, when someone asks about how the contraceptive pills potentially affecting my performance? Or
yeah, I don't know if, like I have quite I think it's like, in my view, it's down to the individual, and every person is different. And you know, the hormone that's in that contraceptive, if we're talking about the oral pill, you can either have a combined pill or an estrogen only pill, and that will really affect your kind of your whole endocrine system. So it's not a light consideration. I do think that doctors can generally just decide to prescribe it to patients for, it's considered almost like a cure-all fix for what could be actually quite a much simpler fix. Like Deb said, you know, you can do things like change your diet, supplement your, you know, nutrients, and see or exercise, even things that perhaps the GP may not have time to address in an appointment, but will often prescribe a contraceptive to manage symptoms. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary and it's 100% the right thing. But I've been offered it before for actually a misdiagnosis, and ended up having horrendous migraines. And you know, it clearly wasn't right for me. But I think different people have different experiences with it. And for athletes, you know, it could affect their performance, but it may provide them with some sense of control over their cycle. So yeah, regulating symptoms. So yeah, it swings and roundabouts, really, in my opinion.
And Deb's, contraceptive pill, in your experience of working with people who might be affected by that, what have you seen? What words of advice do you have?
I didn't actually hear the question because my mum...
Oh yeah, you were going to. Sorry, no, it's just a question from Becky about thoughts on contraceptive pills and the effects they can have on female athletes. Is it an issue that you see?
Yep. So contraceptive pill, there's so many out there now, and there's so many options that a lot of women are quite used to being guinea pig till something fits with them. So if there's a big sporting event coming up, there are women that are frightened to sort of dabble with the contraception because they don't know what's going to happen. So it can be quite frightening, I think, to work out what's going on. Again, I'd go back to the period app and sort of say, like, where am I at with this? What's going on? Because you don't want to be unpredictable, and try and plan it if you can. But there are so many different variations that it's difficult to know which would be better. It depends on the sport that you're doing. It depends on you as an individual, like Fiona said. It can be very, very difficult to manage if you've gone on to the wrong one. Or like from my own example, I was 7 years completely hormone free. Frustratingly, because of my age, I then had to now look at contraceptive pill, and I had a bit of an issue. I had a 17-day bleed where I was really anemic over Christmas, really poorly. I actually worked over Christmas as well, so I had to battle. So I'm talking from experience. Now the contraceptive pill is sort of evened itself out, but it's something that I went back to from when I was 17 years old. I recognised it, I knew it, I felt safe. But I think a lot of women, they go to a GP, they get prescribed particular things, that they've got a 2-3 year span ahead of them to work out, can I do this? And if they're going for a sporting event or whatever it is, it's really important that they've only got a certain level of time to get their training in, to get their nutrition right, to then perform at their best ultimate way. The contraceptive pill is like, really, this on top of everything else that I want to do? So it can be quite frustrating, I think, from a sports element. But now on the flip side, as Fiona said, to be able to control some of it with nutrition and diet, I think you can balance out, or supplements, for example, starflower oil, you can try and balance out some of that impact of the contraceptive pill if it's being utilised for management of periods. If it's being utilised for contraception, then obviously you've got a double-edged sword that you may have different options. Go to a gynecologist. You know, the GP, great, but if you're a serious sports person and you've got special things in place, that's to be referred to a gynecologist for sure. Get it right quicker.
That's interesting you're saying this, because I was going to be kind of my leading on question next is, I think I mentioned in a blurb that the fantastic responsibility which we should welcome is that a lot of people in pain are going to come to us first of all because they feel that a massage is going to sort it out. People in pain, not all people, but a lot of people like that contact. It's also now to get away from things that are triggering you off, and you get to lie down, and it's just fantastic, and you feel great. There's a lot of empathy, consideration, you build a relationship, all that. But that gives us the onus of making sure that rather than letting that person come to see us 8 weeks in a row without asking them questions, we do ask the questions and form this kind of healthcare circle around us where we can send them to different people. I think in a lot of these cases, it's important that we don't come out of our scope of practice. So are you planning to kind of cover, or have you got any advice now on where not to cross the line? So where you just said, for example, it's great if you're a serious athlete and you're seeing a GP, then now we've got the knowledge, you should go and see a gynecologist. And that's brilliant, because that's something which we can do. We can sow that seed, and we're not saying anything or being out of order or, you know, giving advice out of our scope. We're just redirecting people, which is part of our job. But can you see people, you know, going out of the scope of practice a little bit? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah. Are you asking me, Matt?
Don't mind. You can fight it out. You two are going to have to sort this out. I need, when it comes to podcast, good practice now.
You go for it, Debs, if you formulate.
Okay. No problem at all. So I believe in signposting wherever possible. I'm not a gynecologist. I'm not, you know, whatever I'm not. You know, I am a massage therapist. That's what I do. So I can pick up these things. I also have 17 years worth of life experience based around this therapy as well. So I've been doing this, you know, 17 years. So there's life experience where I can say, in my experience, this is what's happened, or in experience of another person, I found, or they found, that the best route for them was this. Perhaps you'd like to try that. So it's more suggestive signposting. But I think where you could cross the line is thinking you have to know everything, or where you could cross the line is you should know everything. You don't have to. You just need to be aware of it, I believe, and then suggest options. And if that person doesn't want to take them, you're not forcing them. You're not a GP. You don't have to do that. Obviously, if you have other things within your practice, so you do dry needling, so you do K-tape, or whatever you do, then obviously you can utilise those because that's what you're qualified in. But if you're looking at passing somebody to a gynecologist, you would suggest going through the right route. So you would say, go to the GP, get the GP to refer you, things like that. because that's the right way, I believe, that you would help somebody that's coming to you. They're coming to you for a massage, or they're coming to you for sports therapy, or whatever they're coming to you for. You recognise that there may be other things going on which you're not able to treat. So I think you don't have to cross the line. You should be aware that you don't have to say, I can fix that for you, because you can't.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, you know, I think Andy Glover has put a comment to say that having seen a female client who hadn't had a regular period for 10 years, talking about this as a male therapist is a must. And he says he was the fourth male therapist to see the client, but the first to ask anything about periods or menstruation, and this has to change. And that's so true.
Thanks, Andy.
So true. Yeah. I think it's you know, like the signposting is 100% essential, like knowing at least where to kind of get an idea of where to refer people is great. But also, you know, in order to get to that point of referring people, you really need to be like happy enough to just kind of open up the conversation. So, you know, as a starting point, really just, yeah, like recognizing and keeping an eye out for where symptoms might be crossing over with. If you've got musculoskeletal specialism, is it just musculoskeletal? You know, is that backache happening at particular times in the month, or is there something going on that's a bit more likely to be hormonal, that kind of thing, and headaches and migraines, and yeah, like generally feeling also like connections with mood, and we talk about anxiety and depression as like standalone symptoms of, you know, mental health, but they are also influenced. We are our hormones, basically, whether you're a man or a woman or anything else. You know, that is the fact. So we have to consider these things in our work with whoever we're working with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can I add into that, Matt?
Of course.
Right. So absolutely what Fiona said, but also from an element of people are a whole being. So we may be targeted on a sports vein to achieve something. We may be targeted to be out of pain, and that's our achievement from a massage therapy session. But I think we're all about the whole being as well. So how are you doing? Are you stressed out because of stuff that is at home? Like trying to be mindful. How do you sleep? What are you eating? You know, it's about the. Do you exercise? What do you do? You know, to help yourself. We're people that come in to see me. I'm like, right, we're a team now. Let's get you better. Let's get you up and running, literally, and let's see what we're doing. So if it means that we can't do all of those elements, they've got to do some of it themselves. We can only provide an hour's worth of element to that, or whatever we've got them in our clinic for, and then they have to go off and do their own thing because they're responsible for themselves. So it's kind of handing the baton back to them a little bit and saying, look, you can come in here every single month with a neck pain, but if you're still sleeping upside down and eating chips every single day, it's not going to work, you know. So there's an element where you kind of have to be a bit sort of, I don't want to say forceful because that's the wrong word, but you have to be kind of like, come on, you know, you're coming in here for a lovely massage, but actually, you know, there's some work for you need to do for people that probably don't have that mindset. I think that's just what I wanted to add in.
Yeah, no, great advice. It's all part of this moving away from 100% hand techniques and manual therapy techniques, which you can still use, but learning how to use this and these, isn't it? More the whole, that's useless for people listening to the podcast. For people listening to the podcast, I just pointed to my mouth and my ears. But yeah, it's all about that, isn't it? And I can hear from listening to both of you that seems to be such a massive part of when you're treating people, you know, listening, the whole subjective thing, talking and asking more questions, building on it, as well as, like you said, if you are happy administering dry needling or KT tape, all those other things, great. And if they enjoy it, then great, that's definitely going to form a part of it. But yeah, the listening and the speaking and referring out, huge, very sensible advice. It's going to be exciting to see you two, or listen to you two working together. And just to reiterate, if you joined us, if you just tuned in, or you're listening to kind of someone's just shown this to you, but yeah, the WIST is going to be called the WIST women in sports therapy, and the email address if you want to discuss or share anything, send them as much emails as you want. I'm not reading them, so yes, send them as much as you like, and it'll be the WIST at the STA.co.uk. Is that fine? Just, you know, as much as you like. We'll give out mobile numbers as well on the show notes. Everyone.
For us there, Matt, thanks.
What it's you've planned kind of 6 episodes. Have you got kind of like, I'm putting you on the spot for this because we're coming to the end of the hour, but what is your kind of biggest goals of this? What are you really hoping that, and you might have said it already, but what are you hoping that people get out of this, like whether it's male, female, whatever? What do you hope this helps improve?
Well, like, just I mean, to put it as simply and plainly, because I think it's been the main vein of the conversation, is like to open up the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if Debs feels the same way.
Absolutely that. Yeah, more knowledge across the board and transparency is the way forward. So the more we share, the stronger we are as an industry, and the more people are helped that way. So yeah.
That's fine. That's a very good answer. I just wanted to hear you say it again. And it is so important. And I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I worry that, there's so much out there. There's so many podcasts. People must be sick of it by now. But there's a lot of kind of, you can't do it. You can't repeat this message enough, can you? Especially when it comes to working with people in pain. There's nowhere near oversaturated with quality information out there. So I don't know whether you guys feel like that, but sometimes I think, here we go, another podcast. You know, everyone knows it, but there's such a lot of misinformation or uninformed people out there. So it's great that you two are going to contribute, and I'm sure it will be really well received. Becky Cowler said, great chat. Look forward to tuning into the podcast. Just to reiterate, the first one will be coming out, all things well, on the 28th, was it, of February? Yeah, 28th of February. That's your episode 1, isn't it?
28th.
That's what's on the newsletter.
Day of the month, I think we agreed.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so then we got the 28th of March, 25th of April, and so on. Yeah, very exciting. Looking very much forward to it. Brian Huxley has said, great chat, guys. Thank you very much. Louise Aker, thank you again. Everybody who's joined us to live, thank you so much for giving up your time to join us. Louise Aker says, really looking forward to the podcast so much. I can share in my ladies running club too. Most definitely. Share. Direct people maybe to this show as well if they want to be live, if they want to chat about it or give some feedback. I mean, it'd be nice to catch up with you two guys maybe in the middle of when you've put a few episodes out, to hear how it's going on, what surprises you've had, maybe some feedback, how things have changed. And that'd be good, wouldn't it? Sometime maybe mid-April, that'd be good. We can put that in. Good. Fantastic. Okay, I'm so glad, Debs, that it worked in the end. Your sound's beautiful now. I don't know how. No, it's great. I'm really glad it worked. These things do kind of happen. So thank you, Deborah Thurlow-Rowley. It's like a tongue twister, your name for me. I really struggle with Thurlow-Rowley. It's easy to say curly-whirly, but that's just your own.
That's curly-whirly, yeah.
Thurlow-Rowley. Thank you, Deborah Thurlow-Rowley. And thank you to Dr. Fiona Higgs as well. If people want to follow you on social media, or what's the best way of them seeing what you're up to? Are you both active on any particular? Is it Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, or what's your kind of... Which one?
So Insta at Serenity Massage Therapy.
Fantastic.
And you? I'm happy with that.
I do have an Instagram and Twitter handle. They're the same, but I'm not particularly active on those. It's at Fiona_Higgs1, but I'm on Facebook much more. So if you want to find me, and just add me as a friend or follow the Move Well Clinic, I'm Fiona MW Higgs, or Move Well Clinic.
Exactly. Then you've got the Move Well website as well, which has probably got contact forms and things, which is move-well, is it?
.co.uk, indeed it is.
.co.uk. So there's always that website as well. And obviously a whole load of other stuff that both of you get involved in. It's not just women's health. There's all other sort of activities which you're involved in and stuff. So yeah, check them out. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. Stick around, because I want to say thank you to you when we go off air. But I'll just say thanks again to people who've joined us live. Clinic Al. I always think that's someone called Al, and I always get that wrong. Clinic Al, thanks for joining us, Al. Anne Cochrane, good to see you as well. Steve Waterson, listening on my way home. Cheers all. And Louise Aker, once again, thank you, ladies. And Matt, thanks for adding me in there instead of just saying thank you, ladies.
Thank
Feel
you.
special. But brilliant. Yeah, thanks, guys. We will be back next Tuesday. So with part 2 of February Focus on Women's Health. And my special guest is going to be Jenny Burrell, who is going to be talking about menopausal transition and its effect on soft tissue, which should be very interesting. This is going to be something I know that one of your episodes is going to be dealing with peri and menopausal and all that. But yeah, next week we've got Jenny Burrell on, who will be going into the effect that can have on soft tissues, and she's got a lot of exciting information about tendinopathies and all that sort of stuff. So that'll be next Tuesday, and you can tune in either if you want to join us live, you can tune in on the Sports Therapy Association Facebook page, or if you don't want to be in Facebook, that's fine, I understand. You could go to YouTube and you could join the live stream there, or if you're listening to the podcast in the comfort of your own home and time, then that's great, but the only price you have to pay is leaving a review or a rating, which would be much appreciated. So half of everybody here will hopefully see you next Tuesday. Take care.